page 163. You will see that there's an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Global bicycle tours. May I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
The man answers the phone. Global bicycle tours. So the word global has been written at the top of the form. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Global bicycle tours. May I help you?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to sign up for a bicycle tour.
Which tour were you interested in? We have the River Valley tour coming up in June and the mountain tour in July.
The River Valley tour is in June. I thought it was in May.
It actually takes place the first week of June.
Oh, I see. Well, I can still do that. The River Valley tour is the one I want.
Splendid. Just let me take your information. May I have your name, please?
Carla Schmidt. That's Carla with a K, not a C. K-A-R-L-A.
Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Address?
Do you need a street address, or can I give you my post office box?
A post office box is fine.
It's P.O. Box 257, Manchester.
Thank you. OK, next. Will you be bringing your own bicycle, or do you want to rent one from us?
I'll bring my own.
Excellent. Now, we provide all the meals, so we need to know if you have any dietary restrictions.
I don't think so. What do you mean?
I mean, if there's any food you can't eat. Some people have food allergies or are vegetarian or have to avoid dairy products, things like that.
Oh, I see. Well, yes, I'm a vegetarian. I never eat meat.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10 on page 163. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
All right, I'll make a note of that. Now, the total cost of the tour is $750.
That much?
The price includes everything. Food, hotel, transportation, everything.
Everything?
Yes, everything. The only other thing is you'll want to tip the tour guide. We usually recommend 5% of the total tour cost.
A 5% tip? I guess that's reasonable.
In order to reserve your space on the tour, I'll need a 30% deposit.
Do you need that right away?
We generally ask for the deposit at least 4 weeks before the tour begins. The River Valley tour begins, 6 weeks from now. So you'll need to pay the deposit in 2 weeks.
I think I can do that. I wonder if you could tell me something. How will our luggage be transported? Do we carry it on our bicycles?
No, you leave that to us. We have a van that carries your luggage from hotel to hotel each day, so you don't have to worry about it.
Great. I have a luggage rack for my bike, but I guess I won't have to bring that.
No, you won't. But there are a few items we recommend that you bring. We can't control the weather, so you should bring a raincoat or rain gear.
Yes, that's a good idea. And I should have my own spare tyre too, shouldn't I?
Actually, you don't need that, as our guide always carries some. And of course, you won't need maps either, since our guide has the route all planned.
What about a water bottle? I'll need that, won't I?
Yes, you should definitely have a water bottle. A camera would be a good idea too, since that tour goes through some very scenic areas.
I have a guidebook of that area. I wonder if I should bring it along.
We don't recommend guidebooks. It would just be extra weight, and the tour guide knows a great deal about the area.
Yes, I see. Is there anything else I need to know?
I think we've covered the important points. I'll send you a tour brochure, and you can call again if you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a radio presenter interviewing a man about the Sydney Harbour Bridge. First you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully to the interview and answer questions 11 to 16.
Well, good morning again, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives, the weekly New South Wales radio programme on subjects of general interest from our local area. Today I have in the studio Mr. George Simmons. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Anne.
So what are you going to talk to us about today, George?
Well, for people from New South Wales, and particularly Sydney, this will be of great interest, I hope. I'm going to tell you a little about Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Wow, that'll be so interesting.
I think so. To start with, I'd like to tell you a little about the size of the bridge. The arch span is 503 metres, and the weight of the steel arch is 39,000 tonnes. The summit is 134 metres above mean sea level, though it can actually increase by as much as 18 centimetres on hot days, as the result of steel expanding in heat. The two pairs of pylons at each end are about 89 metres high, and are made of concrete and granite. The steel used for the bridge was largely imported. About 79% came from the United Kingdom, but the rest was Australian-made. The granite was quarried in Moruya down the coast, and the concrete is also Australian.
So most of the steel used to make our great bridge actually came from England?
Yes, I'm afraid so. However, the workforce were all Aussie.
Thank God for that. When was the bridge actually built?
The bridge was opened in 1932, but work first began in 1924, with the construction of the bridge approaches and spans, with two separate teams building the arch on each side, working towards each other. The arch was successfully joined on August the 19th, 1930. I'm afraid that working practices weren't very fair in those days, and the local government demolished 438 homes, which were in the way of the approaches, and as many as 800 families living there were displaced without compensation. The standards of industrial safety were inadequate too. 16 workers died during its construction, mainly from falling off the bridge.
I didn't realise that.
Yes. The bridge was formally opened on the 19th of March 1932 by the Premier of New South Wales, Mr. Jack Lang. When it was opened, it was the longest single-span steel arch bridge in the world, and it was one of the greatest engineering masterpieces of its time. Several songs were also composed in advance for the occasion, but these have now largely been lost or forgotten. However, 3 postage stamps were issued to commemorate the opening of the bridge, and these still exist. One of these stamps, with a face value of 5 shillings, is now worth several $100s today.
You now have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the interview and answer questions 17 to 20.
So that's the history of the bridge. Is the bridge still the same today as when it was built?
No, it's quite different. The basic structure is the same, of course. Originally, the bridge was constructed to carry a road, 2 sets of tram lines and railways. In 1957, the 2 tram lines were removed when Sydney abolished its trams, thus giving the bridge 2 more traffic lanes. Today it carries 8 traffic lanes, 2 railroad lanes and a footpath along its eastern side. One of the eastern traffic lanes is now a dedicated bus lane. The bridge is often crowded, and in 1992 the harbour tunnel was opened to help carry the traffic load. More than 160,000 vehicles cross the bridge each day. Before the harbour tunnel was opened, this figure was as high as 182,000, and would be much higher today if it were not for the tunnel. Pedestrians, horses and push bikes are not allowed on the bridge anymore.
Wow, the bridge actually carries that much?
Oh yes. Actually, before the harbour bridge opened, it was completely packed with railway carriages, trams and buses to stress test its load-bearing capacity. While it has had many traffic jams since, and 500,000 people walked across it on its 50th anniversary, it has probably never been asked to carry that much of a load since.
Amazing. And I suppose the toll for crossing the bridge has changed a bit too.
I'm afraid so. The initial toll charged for a car was 6 pence, while a horse and rider were charged 3 pence. Today the toll costs $3, but is only charged when travelling to the south as an efficiency measure to speed up traffic flow.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 3. You are going to listen to a conversation between 2 students about preparing a questionnaire as part of an essay assignment. First, look at questions 21 to 24. As you listen, answer the questions.
I've never written an essay of more than 1,500 words before, Anne.
Me neither, Mark, and it scares me.
I wouldn't worry. We'll just have to pretend it's 4 essays of 1,500 words and join them together.
It says here in the assignment notes Dr. Brightwell gave us that we're to write between 5,000 and 6,000 words on some aspect of students' attitudes, backed up by our own research, which we present in the form of tables, graphs, charts or whatever, and supported by reference to the list of books she gave us. Oh, I didn't realise there had been so many social science books written about students.
Oh, yeah. There are a lot. And the questionnaire?
Yes. We have to prepare a questionnaire to gather our own data for the graphs, etc., and hand it in to Dr. Brightwell in draft form in 2 weeks' time.
2 weeks?
That's what she said, and what it says here. She says that it's better to have it checked before we go on to collect the information and start the writing.
Suppose she's right. We'd better get started then. But she didn't say how we were going to put the questionnaire together. Does it say anything in the notes?
Nope. It only says that we are limited to 4 sides of A4 and no more than 50 questions.
If that's the case, it's not that bad.
Before the conversation continues, look at questions 25 to 30. For questions 25 to 30, match the points mentioned in the table to the speaker. Circle M for Mark or A for Anne.
So, how are we going to do it?
Well, first we need to know who we're aiming it at. Then decide how many questions we're going to ask. I think we could have about 40 questions maximum. I don't think there's any real need to go up to the 50 limit. And I think we should keep the questions themselves very simple.
Don't worry. In my case, they will be.
We could have a mixture of question types, like multiple choice questions, yes, no, and agree, disagree, with boxes for people to tick. If people are asked to write down anything, it's unlikely they will fill it in.
So, are we going to give this questionnaire out to people to hand in, or are we going to just stop and ask them around the campus or on the street?
I don't really know. Did she say anything about this? No, she didn't. And there is nothing in these notes she gave us either.
I think we ought to give them out.
OK.
Anyway, it won't affect the way we design the questionnaire.
We're both doing it on different subjects, but there's nothing wrong with pooling our ideas about the mechanism of the questionnaire.
No, none. What are you doing your project on?
I've been thinking about doing something around the subject of how aware students are of world affairs. People think that we're all up to date, but I very much doubt it. It would also be interesting to compare students in different years. And you?
I'm doing something on health and sport, and whether students are more or less active since they came to university.
Oh, sounds interesting. As the questionnaires can be anonymous, I'll fill in your first questionnaire for you. But I'm sure you won't be surprised by my answers.
Somehow, I don't think so.
I suggest we put together about 20 or 25 questions each and then meet tomorrow or the day after and compare them.
Are you going to type yours up?
Yeah, then I can come round to your place and we can work on them. You've got a laptop, haven't you?
Yes, and I've got some new design software so we can play around with the layout.
Brilliant. Are you any good at doing charts and things?
I know how to do simple things on the computer, but we'll sort something out.
OK.
I feel much better about all this now. It doesn't seem quite as bad as I first thought.
No, don't worry, we'll get it done.
That's the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 4 on page 116. Section 4. You will hear a lecturer talking about the solar eclipse in history. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 36. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
Good evening and welcome to this month's Observatory Club lecture. I'm Donald Mackey and I'm here to talk to you about the solar eclipse in history. 1,000 years ago, a total eclipse of the sun was a terrifying religious experience. But these days, an eclipse is more likely to be viewed as a tourist attraction than as a scientific or spiritual event. People will travel literally miles to be in the right place at the right time to get the best view of their eclipse. Well, what exactly causes a solar eclipse when the world goes dark for a few minutes in the middle of the day? Scientifically speaking, the dark spot itself is easy to explain. It's the shadow of the moon streaking across the Earth. This happens every year or two, each time along a different, and to all intents and purposes, a seemingly random piece of the globe. In the past, people often interpreted an eclipse as a danger signal heralding disaster, and in fact the Chinese were so disturbed by these events that they included among their gods one whose job it was to prevent eclipses. But whether or not you're superstitious or take a purely scientific view, our earthly eclipses are special in three ways. Firstly, there can be no doubt that they're very beautiful. It's as if a deep blue curtain had fallen over the daytime sky as the sun becomes a black void surrounded by the glow of its outer atmosphere. But beyond this, total eclipses possess a second, more compelling beauty in the eyes of us scientists, for they offer a unique opportunity for research. Only during an eclipse can we study the corona and other dim things that are normally lost in the sun's glare. And thirdly, they are rare. Even though an eclipse of the sun occurs somewhere on Earth every year or two, if you sit in your garden and wait, it will take 375 years on average for one to come to you. If the moon were any larger, eclipses would become a monthly bore. If it were smaller, they simply would not be possible. The ancient Babylonian priests, who spent a fair bit of time staring at the sky, had already noted that there was an 18-year pattern in their occurrence, but they didn't have the mathematics to predict an eclipse accurately.
In the second part, the speaker talks about a number of scientists. Look at questions 37 to 40. Now listen carefully and complete the table.
It was Edmund Halley, the English astronomer, who knew his maths well enough to predict the return of the comet, which incidentally bears his name, and in 1715 he became the first person to make an accurate eclipse prediction. This brought eclipses firmly into the scientific domain, and they've since allowed a number of important scientific discoveries to be made. For instance, in the eclipse of 1868, two scientists, Janssen and Lockyer, were observing the sun's atmosphere, and it was these observations that ultimately led to the discovery of a new element. They named the element helium, after the Greek god of the sun. This was a major find, because helium turned out to be the most common element in the universe after hydrogen. Another great triumph involved Mercury. I'll just put that up on the board for you now. See, there's Mercury, the planet closest to the sun, then Venus, Earth, etc. For centuries, scientists had been unable to understand why Mercury appeared to rotate faster than it should. Some astronomers suggested that there might be an undiscovered planet causing this unusual orbit, and even gave it the name Vulcan. During the eclipse of 1878, an American astronomer, James Watson, thought he'd spotted this so-called lost planet. But, alas for him, he was later obliged to admit that he'd been wrong about Vulcan and withdrew his claim. Then Albert Einstein came on the scene. Einstein suggested that, rather than being wrong about the number of planets, astronomers were actually wrong about gravity. Einstein's theory of relativity, for which he's so famous, disagreed with Newton's law of gravity in just the right way to explain Mercury's odd orbit. He also realized that a definitive test would be possible during the total eclipse of 1919, and this is indeed when his theory was finally proved correct. So there you have several examples of how eclipses have helped to increase our understanding of the universe. And now let's move on to the social aspects, and I think you'll find
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Let's